Jimmy, I am so excited to be here. I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am. And I'd love to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to all of you who are joining this call. And thank you so much for being willing to listen to what I want to tell you about custody. I am massively, massively passionate about custody and what it could do and how it can change everything. And one of the really amazing things about this virtual environment in which we are presenting this conference is that we can all be together in this bubble where we're sharing this common experience and common bonding and having an opportunity to learn things that are going to really transform the world. And specifically, I want to talk to you about how it is that custody is going to change everything, how it is that custody is going to transform what we're doing, how we're doing it, how we're thinking about things, why custody is not only transformational and exciting, but critical to the future of our industry and our businesses. And so let's begin by me explaining some of the context elements around how custody is going to change everything. But before I start with that, I do want to share a personal anecdote. I went to my first CoinGeek conference at the beginning of this year in February in London. And that experience was, for me, transformative. It gave me an opportunity to meet a community of people who I suppose I had known existed intellectually, but who I had an opportunity to spend that week with and to tap into the passion, the power, the talent, and a vision that is truly transformative. And as a result of participating in that conference, my life actually changed. I changed the career path I was on. I changed the partners I was working with because the power of BSV, the power of Bitcoin and the blockchain was so evident to me that I wanted to be part of doing an entirely new way of approaching custody. And I'm going to be sharing that with you today because custody and this conference are actually manifestos for what we all believe in from a community perspective. We're here together virtually. And as you can see, I'm obviously not there. I'm sitting on the top of a mountain in Utah. And this mountain was funded by a group of entrepreneurs, artists, and early crypto adopters who wanted to create something different. And this mountain is an analog for what we're doing and an analog for what custody is all about. In that if you believe in something and you engage with it, you can transform and you can transform things in a very meaningful way. And custody, which, as Jimmy said, most people don't think about, custody is the tool that is going to enable us to do that. And BSV and the blockchain are the tools that are going to turbocharge that element of what we're doing. So let's talk about custody and how it changes everything. And let's begin to understand that. Let's begin with some context that will explain some terms that I think are very important for everybody here to understand. And that context boils down to understanding the what, the who, and the why. So as we look at that, let's go and explore those definitions on this slide and talk about what it is that a custodian does. So most of you, if I were to ask you, if we were in the room together, if I were to ask you to raise your hands and tell me where you store your digital assets, you would tell me that you're storing those digital assets in some form of wallet that you probably control. And that's basically called self-custody because you're in charge of what's happening in that environment and you're storing and protecting those assets. But what is very important about all of this is understanding that custody itself is something that is both exciting, important, and transformational. And the reason it's exciting is because, as I mentioned before, it's a tool that can change things. It's a tool that can enable us to do things differently while still staying within the parameters of the existing regulatory framework, which gives us more power. Custody is important because it allows you to move from an environment where you are operating in a silo as an individual or if you were an institution, you were operating just within your boundaries of your organization. What custody does is it eliminates those boundaries and allows you to participate more fully in an ecosystem where you and everything you're doing is protected, and you avoid things like counterparty risk, and you also create more seamless mechanisms for doing settlement and for clearing trades. And custody is also, given the fact that it's exciting and it's a tool and it's important because of the things I just mentioned, it is therefore transformational, because that transformational aspect of what custody does allows you to blur the boundaries between what is physical and the real world and the virtual. And it allows you, by doing that, to unlock elements of liquidity and unlock assets that were previously very, very difficult to leverage and to generate the types of returns you wanted them to generate. So let's be very specific about some definitions. So there are a number of clear definitions that I think are important for us to be on the same page with, because what happens typically in these environments is we tend to not always use the same words in the same way. And so let's talk about some things that will get us commonality in terms of what we're talking about. So custody, as I mentioned before, is the storing of assets in a safe and secure fashion done by an independent third party. Self-custody, obviously, is when you hold it yourself, but custody in the broad financial sense of the term is when a trusted third party, a regulated entity, holds it for you. So that's the what. The who is the custodian, who, as I mentioned before, will be a regulated institution. And the why does this custodian and this custody service exist? It is to basically provide a mechanism for storing, managing, and reporting on critical assets. And assets are essentially things that will basically provide you with value at some point in the future, some sort of future economic value. And in that environment, there are basically two types of assets. There are real world assets that we're all familiar with in the sense that they're physical, or they have a long history that we have worked with. And that's things like real estate, stocks and bonds and precious metals. And then there are digital assets, virtual assets, which are cryptocurrencies, tokenized assets, manifestations of those real assets that exist in the digital world. And that set of definitions is very important, because understanding those definitions gives us the ability to be able to understand the power of custody and what it can do for us. So as we think about the power of custody, custody basically consists of three things. It consists of storing an asset, storing it securely, storing it in a way that is protected from natural disaster, protected from criminal activities, protected from unforeseen acts of one kind or another. It provides a mechanism for acting on those assets where you can buy, sell, trade, leverage them. And it provides you with a mechanism for reporting. And it does all of that through the services of an independent third party who is regulated and is following a set of common rules, so everybody is operating from the same baseline. And what that does is it gives a support for a number of different buying drivers. So you have people who just want to safekeep their assets. You have people who want to comply with regulatory elements, and you have people who want to be in a position to take advantage of tax elements. And custody services and provides all three of those things and does it across a broad sweeping ecosystem. And more specifically, this power enables and can be applied across a broad sweeping ecosystem that covers both real world and digital assets. So let's talk for just a second about the custody in the real world. In the real world, you have what I refer to as a liquidity ecosystem. So that circle that you see in front of you shows this very, very interesting virtuous circle where assets, real world assets, if you start at the top, are held by a custodian. They are held safely and managed and acted upon and reported. And they act on behalf of the beneficial owner, the ultimate owner. That enables those assets to be traded and exchanged for other similar assets. And it then allows them to grow and be leveraged in ways that are beneficial that would be difficult to achieve if they weren't participating in this ecosystem. And it also allows those assets to be tokenized in the form of securitization and the creation of things like derivatives. And so this circle continues to go around creating additional assets, unlocking liquidity within that real world, and enabling people to have financial power as a result of that process. This traditional world has a comparable representation in the non-physical world. So if you think about this and you move into the world of digital assets, it's a similar circle where effectively what you have is the assets are held by a custodian. Being held by the custodian enables them to be traded and exchanged for other assets in the digital environment. It allows them to grow and be leveraged in different ways by borrowing, lending, or creating derivative products. And here's where this world gets a little bit different and gets a little bit more interesting and exciting. And the transformational piece I talked about before is in the digital world, you can tokenize assets. And you can not only tokenize the digital assets and create another manifestation of that asset, but you could also take real world assets and tokenize them and give them a new life in that environment. Now, most of you guys are all sitting out there saying, yeah, Karen, this is not new news. We already know that. Yeah, big deal. The previous panel was talking about this. But what makes this so important is that when these two worlds come together, the two worlds are coming together through the power of custody. It's custody that is enabling these two to work in a simultaneous, synergistic way. Because custody, when it's playing its role as the independent third party and offering the safekeeping and offering the regulatory compliance and offering the ability for individuals to take advantage of different types of financial vehicles like retirement plans in the United States, like self-directed retirement plans, or take advantage of vehicles like single member LLCs. Custody enables that. And not only does custody enable it from a technical perspective by providing that safekeeping and the regulatory structures within which all of this can function, custody also provides a series of very important and critical technological capabilities that enable that, while at the same time eliminating counterparty risk and allowing this whole ecosystem to work together more effectively. This vision of what custody does is truly transformative. And there are a lot of people who are working on this and trying to do this. But there is only one group of people that is looking at this within the context of BSV, because BSV and the blockchain has the potential to even greater create transformation around how this works. So if you think about it for just a second, one of the things that you need if you're a custodian, if you remember what I said earlier, is that you need to store the asset, you need to act on the asset, you need to be able to report on the asset. So the people who are trusting you with their assets to store them safely, they need to know what you're doing with them. They need to understand that it's being done properly. But not only do you need to know that, people who are trading with you need to know that. People who are relying on your assets to do things need to know that. And so there are three things that a custodian needs. A custodian needs transparency, a custodian needs immutability, and a custodian needs auditability. And guess what? BSV and the blockchain provides that. So if you think about this and you think about the transformation of this and you think about BSV, BSV changes this. So here we are. So if you think about how it's turbocharged through the use of the blockchain. It's turbocharged natively through the transparency, immutability, and auditability that are native in the BSV. And so today, when I told you at the beginning of my presentation that I had changed my career and I decided to go and do something different, what I'm doing in partnership with the Bayesian Group is we are creating the first true blockchain-driven custodian powered by BSV that will be delivered natively using the BSV capability, and it will natively deliver that transparency, immutability, and auditability that we've talked about. By doing that, what we will enable us enable people to do is that we will be able to seamlessly move between both sides of that picture that I'm talking about. You'll be able to take real assets, like the ones I mentioned before, that are illiquid to a large extent today, like real estate, precious metals, private equity, securitized loans, stocks and bonds, even though stocks and bonds obviously aren't illiquid, but they have limitations in what they can do. You will be able to take those, transform them into digital manifestations using the power of BSV, and do it in such a way that you will be able to create that virtuous circle that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, which is you will be able to hold them safely in custody and be able to see what's happening with them, be able to give guidance and direction, but also be able to have auditability and transparency, not only for the ultimate beneficial owner, but for everybody who wants to trade with them. You'll be able to then trade seamlessly and do that while still keeping your assets safely within the confines of the custodian. So you will not have the risks that you would run into today, where you have to expose your assets to potential hacking and other types of theft or fraud, because they will be held securely by the custodian. And you will be able to do that in a way that all of the counterparties will have clear visibility and understanding of what is being held there. And I can't emphasize enough how powerful that is, because that is what enables all of this virtuous circle to work. And it also unlocks a whole series of other capabilities where you can lend and borrow those assets. You can create additional types of financial instruments that sit on top of them. And all of that can be tokenized and then feed back into the circle. And what this does, and why this is so important, and why I'm so passionate about this, is that it does something that has never been done before, because it unlocks financial instruments for everyone. It gives everyone, not just the top 1%, not just qualified investors, not just people who have a long history and understanding of how financial instruments work. What this does is it creates an equitable environment where everyone who has an asset will have an ability to enter into this ecosystem. And when they enter into this ecosystem, they will have the ability to join in the benefits of this entire synergistic, self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating, expansive mechanism for giving people the right and the freedom to choose how it is they want to live, how they want to allocate their assets, and how they can help participate in a community where others share that vision. And all of that is driven by the power of custody, because custody delivers that immutability, that transparency and auditability, and at the same time enables and leverages the capability of BSV for micropayments and for smart contracts that allow all of this to operate in a way where people have eliminated risk, they have reduced the potential for theft, they have created a mechanism where you can create additional assets that can sit on top of this in a way that is truly transformative and different. And so as I think about that, what you need to be thinking about yourselves is, if you are sitting and providing your own custody and your self-custody, one of the things that you should be considering is whether that self-custody action that you're taking is limiting your ability to participate in this broader ecosystem in the type of way that would be beneficial for you. And you need to be thinking about how, by participating in this and helping turbocharge and drive this ecosystem with all these potentials, you can actually not only help yourself unlock your financial power, but you can help others unlock their financial power, creating a future for everyone that is more inclusive, more equitable, more powerful, and much, much more of what we as a community believe in. By blurring these boundaries between the real and the physical and the virtual, we are creating a new world that will enable us to do something that nobody has ever done before. And so I want you to stay tuned, because we at the Bayesian Group and the Fabric Qualified Custody are going to be, in the next coming weeks, are going to be showing you how this is going to work and how it's going to fit together. And I'm very, very excited and looking forward to sharing that progress with the community and being in a position in the future where we can talk about this. Thank you very much. And Jimmy, thanks once again for giving me the opportunity to be part of this and participating in CoinGeek.